Welcome to our 40th anniversary. I'm Sister Susan Mika with the Benedictine Sisters. Over all these decades, there have been many journeys on a number of paths. Issues have found us along the way. In this format, we can only tell a few of the many stories that encompass the rich SRIC history. SRIC was involved in environmental justice since it began. One of the first actions in 1983 was to work with the Sisters of the Sorrowful Mother in Milwaukee and the Sisters of Divine Providence in San Antonio to see if we could stop the company called Houston Industries from building the South Texas nuclear project. At that time, there was no long-term plan to dispose of nuclear waste, which must be stored for hundreds, if not thousands of years. The newspapers and television stations could not believe that nuns were trying to do this. The SRIC phone rang off the hook for 3 days. We received 7% of the vote and 14% of the shareholders abstained. That was a huge vote at that time. The company later admitted in meetings with us that if we had filed earlier, how could we? We weren't in existence. We might have been successful. And by the way, in 2022, there is still no permanent national repository for nuclear waste. It's stored on site at each plant. The world saw the consequences of this at the accident at Chernobyl plant in 1986 and in 2011 when the Fukushima nuclear plant in Japan was overcome by a tsunami. The world recently had a lesson in this also when the Russians took over one of the nuclear plants in Ukraine and took it off the grid. Over the years, SRIC members have worked on issues that look at the work environment where workers find themselves. Our members raised issues and questions about the Hanes workers making hosiery and workers sewing products for Disney. We went to Haiti in 1989 to understand how baseballs were produced by Wilson and Figge International, which owned Rawlings. Women workers made $3.10 a day and were expected to sew 12 dozen balls. At that time, one baseball retailed for $4. SRIC worked with the Coalition for Justice in the Maquiladoras, which we call CJM, so our members could experience firsthand what workers endured in Mexico. The wages were $4 a day, all the while making so many of the products that we use every single day. SRIC members were there in Brownsville when CJM was formed in 1989. This was the first coalition of its type. International, multi-sector, religious groups, women's groups, unions, environmental groups working together. Now we take this for granted that these many types of groups would be all around the same table. These Maquila visits formed the basis of questions which our members then presented to companies during meetings and shareholder annual events. The National Toxics Campaign Lab tested and named the chemicals that companies were dumping into the land, the water, and industrial parks. Our members were involved in raising the issues about why babies were being born without brains in Matamoros and Brownsville. And just before a lawsuit was set to start and show evidence that all the companies settled with the families. Mexico made a policy that you have to register now when you cross the border and be escorted by the company personnel in order to visit a factory. Too many of our members were knocking on the door and going in to see what was happening in the factories unannounced. Many of those plants left our part of the planet and relocated in China, Bangladesh, and many other countries. This makes it harder to have direct knowledge of their practices and, of course, to visit them. Many ICCR staff, especially David Schilling and Sister Valerie Heenanen, worked with us on all these issues. And these adventures led us to being involved in trade issues. So who was making the products? How were they being transported and sold? Who was benefiting? So CJM developed one of the first codes of conduct, which was shared with companies. The laws that were being followed, working conditions, living conditions of workers, and environmental concerns. So many companies then decided to develop some type of code. Howard Schultz of Starbucks invited me to come to Seattle to talk about what could be included in a code of conduct. That was interesting. SRIC has been working on mining issues. Anna Falkenberg and Father Seamus from the Oblates of Mary Immaculate took trips to the mines in Ghana, Peru, Colombia, and others to see the area and hear firsthand the concerns of the local communities. Many had become more aware of mining issues because of the elements that are needed to make our iPhones or smartphones. And couples want wedding rings that are sustainably produced. Another company that ICCR and SRIC members have worked on for decades is Walmart. The issues we have focused on there have been worker-oriented also. Wages, healthcare benefits, scheduling of shifts, just to name a few. When we first started, Walmart was paying $4.40 an hour. Now they have raised the wages to $11 to $12 as starting wage, and we're still asking them to raise it more. SRIC has worked with groups raising questions in the Eagle Ford Shale area. Currently, the issues are around the impact of fracking and methane. In earlier days, it was with Chevron and the impact of the uranium mine they managed in Santa Maria, and the impact of the mill tailings on the health of those living near the plant. When Sister Imelda Gonzalez went to the annual meeting, Chevron did not even know where Santa Maria was. That meeting was held in San Francisco. After all that publicity, Chevron sold the plant and later settled confidentially with settlements with some of those families that were most affected by the problems. Many decades ago, at the insistence of Father Mike Crosby, SRIC and ICCR members spoke with insurance companies about what will happen to their profit margins because of more frequent storms, more powerful hurricanes, and our disrupted life because of weather. These concerns about this disruptive weather events have intensified. So how many times have we heard, oh, this is the 500-year flood. Oh, now it's the 100-year flood. Oh, did we have that again last year, or was that 5 years ago? Many new issues have come up, and we have to partner with many groups to craft these new resolutions. In 2022, new types of resolutions have been developed to meet the signs of the times. This is crucial for all of us to stay relevant. In order to do this, we must have collaboration, legal advice, and openness to working together. In the past 2 years, climate change resolutions have risen to the top and have been filed with many companies. These issues take on a level of complexity as we better try to understand what a net zero emissions world by 2050 or sooner would look like. Tim Smith mentioned the racial equity audit resolutions, which were developed after the murder of George Floyd and the awareness that Black Lives Matter raised. In 2021, it was a banner year for racial justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion resolutions. 42% of these resolutions that went to a vote won majority votes. Amazing. After all these years, some of the companies and the Washington NFL football team and the Cleveland baseball team started to change their names of their franchise or the names on their products. Gary Browse at ICCR led this effort for so many years, and finally now we're seeing some results. For 23 years, shareholders have held votes on whether Home Depot should disclose its EEO1 data. Due to sustained pressure from investors led by the Benedictine Sisters of Boerne, joined by the New York City Comptroller's Office, Boston Trust Walden, Trillium, and Calvert, the company finally released its first EEO1 report last year. Many groups from SRIC were co-filers on this resolution for all these years. We find ourselves in the midst of a lawsuit challenging the Securities and Exchange Commission, which we call the SEC, the rules that they enacted at the end of 2020 seek to limit shareholder participation in these extremely important processes. The federal judge overseeing the lawsuit will make a determination at the end of May 2022. This will affect our work for the next decades. Pray for him that he can understand the importance of this work by shareholders, especially small shareholders, and vacate the 2020 new rules. Just to say, SRIC members have consistently used their stock ownership over these 40 years to make a huge difference in the arena of corporate accountability. The questions are never popular. Sometimes the answers are not satisfactory or do not come at all. But we never give up. We keep asking the hard questions and envisioning a world where change can happen and will be based on what is in the interest, the common good, what is in the interest of all. So SRIC, here's to the next 40. We're still seeking that promised land. Thanks for coming tonight.